All right, let's talk more about Apple as well as the impact President Trump's policies are having on the broader technology space. Joining us now is CNBC's Steve Kovach, also Kristina Partsinevelos, alongside with DA Davidson's Gil Luria, who covers, by the way, many of these mega cap technology companies that could be impacted by the tariff and trade policy. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Let's roundtable it with our reporters here first, and we'll start with the Apple story.
Right.
Yes, while Megan was chatting, you kept kind of nodding your head and, shaking your head at the same time and kind of waving at Kristina. There is a good amount of, I guess, skepticism may not be the right word, but everyone's waiting to see when this will actually happen, how it actually gets executed.
Right.
So what exactly are you learning with regard to this big Apple announcement, and what exactly we can expect to see in terms of the dollars actually hitting the street?
That is the big question, right? Where is this money coming from? Where is it going? And I looked back at the capital expenditures and operating expenditures at Apple over the last few years. OPEX in 2024 for Apple was like $57 billion. Capital expenditures, let me see here, $9.5 billion. Extrapolate that out, that does not equal $600 billion over the next 4 years. So what is Apple doing here? They're likely including a lot of stuff that's already baked into their expenses. That includes paying Qualcomm, there's licensing fees to use modems. That includes things potentially like the amount of money app developers make when they put stuff in the App Store. This is not $600 billion to build factories here in the United States. Now, there is one factory being built here in the United States. That's in Houston, Texas, my old hometown. And in the northwest side, Foxconn, Apple's partner that makes all the iPhones and other gadgets and gizmos for Apple, they're building this facility out there that's going to not make iPhones, but these artificial intelligence servers that are used to power Apple Intelligence. Very different than what the president's talking about. What Apple is giving the president today is a very nice headline number that he can tout and say Apple is investing $600 billion, but I can guarantee you that is not, most of that is not going to be building stuff here in the United States. So the question becomes, when Cook is at the White House today, what products, what stuff are you going to be making here?
You know what else? Because Kristina was also nodding and shaking her head at the same time during that report from Megan. We have seen, though, fabs, facilities, and whatnot put foundationally on the ground in the United States as a direct result of government programs, whether they be a part of this administration or the last one with the CHIPS Act. So there is rubber meeting the road and shovels in the ground for certain aspects of these types of investments. What happens with the chip side of things when it comes to all of this massive investment in America?
I think the expectations need to be tempered, and I say that with the boots in the ground for the chips world. Many of them have been delayed. Ohio, Intel's plant till 2030. Samsung, TSMC, Arizona's second plant, possibly now next year, maybe into 2027. I think a point that Steve raised is double counting. What many of these companies will do is they'll promise X amount, hundreds of millions of dollars, but that is double counting some previous investments. An example, which I think NVIDIA would maybe say I'm wrong on, but they promised 500 million themselves in just April over the next 4 years. I should say 500 billion, a larger amount, much larger. But they are, too, going to use the Foxconn Houston plant specifically for AI servers, and eventually they want to have humanoid robots over there as well. So there are boots on the ground happening, but there are major issues, environmental delays, labor shortage that I don't think we're addressing enough. TSMC had major problems with their first plant because there wasn't enough talent here in the United States that were capable of working on these advanced machines, which is why they had to bring in foreign workers. And I think that's a major issue for a lot of the manufacturing that's going to go on here in the United States.
All right, and then Gil, let's bring you into this conversation before we kind of widen this whole thing out. Apple shares are up, and it was a good amount on this bit of news coming out of the White House with Tim Cook making a visit and making this announcement that we are anticipating this afternoon. Just how important is the investor narrative going to center around how much Apple and Tim Cook get along with the White House and the Trump administration writ large?
Well, that is the story. The fact that he's there and that he has a say in policy is what investors really care about. They want to make sure that exemption you talked about it for the India tariffs holds up, that they're not going to get snagged by that 50% tariff. They're not going to get snagged by the policy rivalry with China. Tim Cook being there, being part of this conversation, making headlines for the president, is what gives investors optimism that Apple will continue to be able to sell iPhones in the US in the short term without too much tariffs. Your conversation is spot on in the fact that we have to separate the rhetoric, the big numbers from the accounting here. Apple is not going to invest $600 billion over the next 3 years in the United States incrementally. We're going to count a lot of its existing spend, its partner spend, and it's going to build new facilities in the U.S., yes, not $600 billion worth. And the only other thing I'd add is Tim Cook better have his head on a swivel. These press conferences often go a little bit far afield. If you remember, the Stargate announcement that Masa-san came for was supposed to be for $100 billion and ended up being for $500 billion. So Tim Cook hopefully can manage this number down, even if he can't actually deliver on the $600 billion he's already up for.